First of all, I'd like to wish you a Happy New Year. And if it isn't New Year where you are, no, it probably isn't right now, then happy random day. Have a good day. What we're going to do in this video is make bread. The motivation is I've been making bread because I don't want to have non-organic bread. I don't want to consume glyphosate. That's why I'm making it. And I've been doing it for a few months and people have been asking me about it. Well, okay. I've been telling everyone about it. I've been telling everyone about it. But one of the things I noticed is that when I preach about my organic bread making to people, is that people think it's difficult. They think that bread making is difficult. It is not difficult. I don't know what I'm doing, right? I'm not a baker or anything like that. Whatever the hell that means, you know. I don't know what I'm doing. But I can make bread. I can make a loaf that I enjoy. So that's all that matters, right? And it's easy. The point is, it's really easy. So I want to just show you how easy it is, and I'll stop waffling so that this isn't a massively long video of me talking and talking, which I tend to do, I know. Which I will stop. So what do you need for this? This is going to make a sort of small farmhouse loaf. So probably 700 grams, 750 grams, I would say. You need some flour, and of course you need organic flour. If you're going to do this, just go to the effort of getting organic flour. If you want to consume glyphosate, be my guest. I sometimes buy non-organic flour and consume glyphosate as well. I don't want to. Why would I want to? Why would anyone? So, and it's really hard to buy organic bread. There's 2 loaves in Sainsbury's, I noticed. I don't think there's any in Asda. So, if you're going to make bread, make organic because it's really special and you can't buy it really much, except in organic health food stores. So you need your organic flour and you need strong bread flour. It doesn't have to be white, but it has to be strong. You want it to be strong. That's because that makes you can make bread properly using strong flour for reasons I haven't yet bothered to find out. Why you can't use the other flour, who cares? We're going to have 300 grams of that. You're going to need some water, of course, because we're not just going to have dry flour, that would be insane. You need about 320 millilitres of water for 300 grams of flour. Need some salt. I've got Himalayan salt, it was £1 at the local shop, so why not? And you're going to need some yeast. And I use this Easy Bake yeast. I'll explain more about the choice of ingredients as I go through it. Something else you're going to need is oil, which I've left over there on the counter. So hang on a sec. So I've got some organic rapeseed oil here. I like rapeseed oil. It's grown in the UK. It's quite a mild oil. It's a good oil. And it's locally sourced. I mean, what more can you ask for? So there we have organic rapeseed oil. That's our ingredients. Let's just go ahead and get on with this. Now the first thing you want to do is actually prepare the yeast in advance, because what I'm using here is Easy Bake yeast. And this is dry. So it comes in granules and you open it and you keep it in the fridge and it lasts quite a while. And it says makes up to 14 loaves on there, but I've made more than that. I don't put that much yeast in. And what you want to do is make a starter first. You have to activate this yeast because it's dry. If you're going to make bread, don't about with the yeast. Make sure you have fresh yeast. If anything is going to up bread, it's going to be a lack of yeast that doesn't work properly. Your bread won't rise, you'll have a solid brick. The yeast is the most critical aspect, because it's the living aspect of the process. So you need fresh yeast. Don't mess around. Don't go into the cupboard and find one that says, oh, expires this month. Just forget it. Just go and buy some fresh yeast. Just save yourself the bother. Now you've got your yeast, and what we're going to do is take about 100 ml of water, of warm water, and put the yeast in it and mix it in with a little bit of sugar. You can use a bit of flour or use a bit of malted barley or something like that, anything that the yeast will start to ferment and get going. So I've got 100 ml of water in here. I'm just going to put in a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down. And yeah, refined sugar, get over it. And we're going to put in some of this powdered yeast. So I just want to show you that. See how it's dried like that. And you could measure it. I just tend to put in what I think is right, which is maybe just sort of 1 teaspoon, a little bit. And then I just mix it in. And we're going to leave that for 15 minutes to activate. And I'll show you it in 15 minutes and you'll be amazed at what's happened to it. Done. Now in the meantime, while you're waiting for that to be activated, we can prepare the dry ingredients. I've got one of these fantastic ceramic old school bowls and it's perfect for this job. So what we're going to do is start with the flour and put in 300 Gs. We can adjust the recipe afterwards. So if it turns out there's too little flour or too much flour, like if it's too wet or too dry respectively, then we can remove some. I want 500 grams of flour. I've totally lost the plot. 500 grams of flour, not 300, there we go. I'm going to add to that a teaspoon of this salt. You can kind of make it as salty as you want it to be. There's some bollocks about not mixing the salt and the yeast or something like that, I don't know, but yeah, don't put the salt directly into your yeast or something like that. Now for the organic oil. And I'm going to put in 25 grams in there. So I think that'll do. Oh shit, I've put too much in. Never mind, it'll be fine. Now at this point you can effectively just shove whatever else you want in there. I like putting in these black sesame seeds. I think that's pretty cool. And you want it, if you're going to add ingredients in there, add them in at the dry stage. You've got to add them really at this stage before you start mixing it all together so that it's really mixed in properly. It's very hard to get it properly mixed in if you wait until you've kneaded the bread and then try and add it in, because you're kind of then trying to fold it into something which already has like a three-dimensional manifold in space, and it's quite difficult. Whereas at this point it's just a chaotic mess, which is easy to get it in there. So we're going to wait now until the yeast is activated, but I can see that actually the yeast is already bubbling up. So that means the yeast has already started to ferment, and that's great. So I'm just going to pour that in. Now I'm going to add another 200 ml of water. Now, I should have said at the start, wash your hands. I'm just going to go wash my hands now, make sure they're super clean. Tie your hair back, do whatever you need to do, because we're going to get ourselves right in there. And of course, if you haven't washed your hands, then you're going to need this like a beast. So you just start mixing it together. I'm just doing it with one hand because I don't want to get crap all over my hands. So I try and limit that, because eventually it will get dry enough that it won't really be causing a mess on your hands anymore. Whereas you could get, you get sticky all over your hands. Now, I'm going to have to get in there a bit. And we want to basically start picking up all of this flour, and we'll be able to tell whether or not it's too wet or too dry. So this looks like it's too dry, because I probably need maybe 20 ml more water, but let's see what happens if I keep kneading it. Camera's in the way a little bit. Yeah, if you look at that, it's not really picking up that other flour, and that's because I need more water. So it's quite illustrative to show you that. It's a bit of a hassle. I could probably get it in there, but you can see that it's quite difficult to get it actually mixed in. Let's give it a go though, just to check. I would say that's not quite enough water there. So I'm going to add a little bit more water. Just a little bit more, maybe 10 ml, something like that. And it is quite sensitive to the amount of water you've got in there. Right, you can see that once you're at that threshold, that any small amount of water you add or any small amount of flour will have quite a large effect. Now let's have a look at this. I'm just trying to form it into a ball at the moment, just kneading it in, and that to me is still too sticky for me, and so I've shown you that when it's too dry you could see that it wasn't really holding together. That for me is too sticky, because look, it's kind of all sticky on my hand. It will still work as bread, but I personally think that's too sticky. So you can just add on some flour, and what I want to do is get it to a consistency where it's not sticking to my hands. I'm just going to clean off this stuff, and where it is. So if you look at this now, we're getting to a nicer, what I would say is a nicer consistency. Like, it's still wet, it's still got water in it, but it's not really sticking to my hands, so I can knead it, because we're going to knead it for 15 minutes. So if it's all sticking to your hands, then it's going to be quite hard to knead it for 15 minutes. Whereas once you've sorted it out like this, you can see it's coming off my fingers now, then I can now knead it without any issue. And I'm going to do this for 15 minutes. And there's lots of things you could do. If you had a big marble surface, you could knead it quite easily. I tend to do stuff like this: fold it over, knead, rub it in, as well as just like the classic kneading of pushing it down, folding it over, pushing it down again, folding it over. And while you're doing this in the first few minutes, you might notice that it gets a little bit more sticky or whatever. And if you think it's too sticky, you can add a tiny bit more flour. Right, so let's just do this for 15 minutes. Now the point of doing this is to increase the elasticity of the bread so that it captures the bubbles better, so it rises properly and is a nice bread, improves the flavour. Of course, the good thing about this is that during this kneading stage, you can basically go anywhere in the house. So if you've got other people in the house that you want to hang around with, family, then you don't have to be off in the kitchen on your own. You can sort of hang around, and it's kind of a nice communal activity. Right, I'm going to just carry on doing this for 15 minutes. You don't have to do it for 15 minutes. You can probably get away with doing it just for a few minutes. With strong flour, it usually works anyway. But you want to make a nice good bread, you want to put your love into it, so try and do it for 15 minutes if you can. Right, so check that out. That's after 15 minutes of kneading. You can see it's like, just sort of, it's got a nice feel to it now. So what I'm going to do now is just put it into the bowl, cover it with a tea towel, and we're going to leave it to rise. So leave it for several hours, 3 hours, something like that, until it's doubled in size. The yeast has been doing its thing for a few hours, so let's have a look. As you can see, it's expanded quite a lot, which means it's active, it's converting sugars to alcohol, carbon dioxide, expanding. So what we do now is, this is called knocking it back, and it's it looks a bit brutal, but we're just getting the air out. Now you can do this, you can iterate this a few times, like 2 or 3 times if you want, but what I'm going to do is put it in its kind of final loaf form now, rather than doing any more proving steps. So we need something to put it in order to form the final loaf. I've got these silicone tins, bread tins, which are really great because it doesn't stick to them. So you can use anything, or you can just put the whole lump on a baking tray, let it rise, and then put the whole thing in the oven. But what I'm going to do is break this into 2 pieces and then put it in here for the final rise. I think that's about right. I'm just going to lengthen it out a bit. So I'm going to make a couple of loaves. I'm just going to spread that out in the bottom there. And on this one. Right. And now I want this to rise, and then I'm going to cook it. Now what I tend to do with this, because I'm lazy, is I just put them in the oven and leave them overnight. It takes a long time to rise, but then I come down in the morning and they will have risen enough to then just cook. That's the easiest thing to do. Otherwise you can just leave it around the house. If they're in a warm place, in a few hours they'll have risen to the point where you can cook them. Let's just leave them in there and come back to them when they've risen. Several hours have passed and the breads have miraculously escaped the oven and ended up on the side because I had to cook dinner. They're ready to go in the oven. Let's check these out. Ready for the big reveal. Here we go. Da, 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 da. See, that one's risen quite a lot. That one at the back hasn't risen as much. I didn't probably spread it out very evenly, but that's enough. That's fine. Let's put them in the oven. So you want to put them in the oven at gas mark 6, which is, I believe, 180 degrees Celsius. And you should probably preheat it, but it doesn't really matter, I find. And we're going to leave them in there for about 30 minutes. I'm going to put the timer on, I think, for 32 minutes, and then I'm going to come and have a look. Ooh, exciting. There they are, cooking away. Looks like it's done. Now people say you can tell by like tapping the bottom of the loaf, but and it should have a hollow sound. Look how easily they come out of silicone. It's just a piece of cake. Whereas sometimes if you make it with metal or whatever, it might stick to the side. It's not too bad. Probably need to add a bit more flour and water. I mean like 100 grams, 200 grams more to really make these bigger to full loaf size. I've let this cool down a bit, so let's take a look inside. See, look at that, nice and soft, airy. Put some vegan butter on it. Let's give it a go. Delicious. So vain. No, it is delicious, even though I made it myself. I am blowing my own trumpet. That is delicious. Really nice. That is it. So that's how you can make a simple bread. Anyone can do it. Easy as pie. Well, easy as bread. Anyway, I hope that was useful, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.